So thanks everyone for joining us today. It's great to see people from all over the world. Our agenda for today, we're going to keep it fairly brief. We're going to start off by talking about a recent editorial that we published, which gives some more detail about some of these changes. And then we're going to sort of jump into talking about the kinds of submissions you can make to language testing. So we'll start off by talking about our long-standing submission types, what we have always sort of accepted. Then we'll talk about a rationale for some changes that we have recently made, and then an overview of those changes, some new manuscript types, and Paula will be taking you through those. And then at the end, we'll say a few brief words on ORCID IDs and open science, and then we'll open up the floor for questions and answers. And we hope that you'll save all your questions until that point, and you can put things in the chat, or you can probably indicate, raise hand and ask a question live as well. Thanks, Dylan. Great. So the first thing I want to say is that we've just recently published an open access editorial. So this is completely free to view for anyone, whether you have a subscription to the journal or not. We do an editorial at the first issue of every year. And this editorial is an important one because we go into some detail about the new submission types. So if you're interested in following up after this session, we strongly urge you to check out that editorial. There's a couple of ways of accessing it here. Dylan's included a nice QR code, or you can click on the DOI that's on that slide, or just Google innovation and expansion in language testing and you'll find it. So please do take a look at that editorial if you'd like to really learn more about what we're going to be talking about today. So at the moment, prior to this change, language testing has always accepted a range of different submissions, but it's been quite a restricted range. So our typical submission type is an original manuscript, typically a research article, whether that be empirical research or a conceptual style paper. Some of you may not be aware, actually, that in the past year, we increased the word count for that original manuscript submission to 9,000 words. So this is a good opportunity to just communicate that as well. So that's our sort of fairly typical language testing manuscript submission type. We then also accept book reviews, whether commissioned or sometimes unsolicited. Test reviews, similarly, we often commission these, but sometimes people get in touch with test reviews that they have. We have submission space for our special issues, and we run usually one special issue per year. And then we have submission spaces for various editorial matter, and these can be the editorials that Paula and I write, or that special issue guest editors will write as introductions to their special issues or virtual special issues, and sometimes other types of writing like forewords, postscripts, and so on. So these have been the sort of traditional submission types for language testing, but so probably mid last year, we started to think more, and in consultation with our editorial board as well, we started to think about different types of submissions that we could include to sort of widen the scope of what we're doing in the journal. So we had various reasons for exploring this, and the rationale for some of the changes that we're about to present to you are that we wanted to create a journal that catered for diverse types of research. You know, particularly during the pandemic, as we know, there's so many challenges these days in conducting research, also so much innovation. And we wanted to really broaden the scope of what the journal would be accepting and the kinds of research that people are doing out there. So we wanted to accommodate diverse types of research. We wanted to foster high levels of engagement with the journal. So we wanted the journal to become also a forum for discussion, and in some ways to perhaps lead discussion in the field. We wanted to provide sufficient space for rigorous review style pieces. So we've started to receive more submissions which are meta-analyses, but we also wanted to create space for longer systematic reviews. We wanted to, and this is really strongly driven by Paula and Dylan at MSU, I should say, to embrace the principles of open science. And there's lots of movement in this area in the wider field of social sciences, education, linguistics, and so on. And language testing wants to be at the forefront of that. And just more generally, I think a general aim is that we just want to encourage submission of various article types that best serve the wider field. We want to be a relevant journal for the field as it moves forward. So those are the kinds of things that we had in mind as we were thinking of these changes. And I'm going to hand over now to Paula to tell you a bit more about what those changes are.
Great, thank you so much. And yes, so some of the article types that Luke has already mentioned are things like meta-analyses and systematic reviews. So we have put information about these new submission categories on our author guidelines site on the language testing website. And also these changes are reflected in the submission site in Scholar One. When you log in to submit an article to the journal, the new submission categories show up there. So you'll see our original manuscript type is still there, and it's 9,000 words maximum. But in adding meta-analyses and systematic reviews, we're allowed to have those have a specific word count that's fitting for the type of research that people need to include in data reporting in a meta-analysis or a systematic review. So we were able to set the word count for those two journal types or submission types to 12,000 words. Something you'll also notice on our language testing website and in the submission portal is we have links to the APA, that's the American Psychological Association, guidelines for meta-analyses and guidelines for systematic reviews. And we'll go over those a little bit, but those are also there to help people who are writing these, perhaps for the first time, to get a very good outline of all of the different types of required reporting techniques that are generally part of a meta-analysis or a systematic review. So next slide. So just to review a little bit what these two things are, is these are studies of studies. And they're conducted to summarize and compare the results of multiple studies on a given topic. And as the field of language testing grows and is longer entrenched in very, very robust empirical research, people may be wanting to look at summaries of studies that have answered a certain research question to get a synthesis of that reporting on the effects of different things from the study. In particular, meta-analyses are kind of a type of a systematic review in which the researchers use specific statistical approaches to combine effect measures from multiple empirical studies to produce a single estimate of the effect. So both of these types of studies are important. In particular, meta-analyses are important because they can help the field identify publishing biases. And systematic reviews in particular can also inform the field as to where knowledge is lacking. So we're excited to be able to allow authors to submit these with a larger word count to be able to fit everything in that they may need to fit in this type of submission. Next slide. But on the other hand, we're also very interested in shorter reports, a brief report. And brief reports are a submission category that you'll see in other journals like TESOL Quarterly or in the journal Nature. And these are shorter, they're about 3,000 words or less, and they are empirical, practical, or action-oriented research. These types of studies will have less concerning the literature review and focus more on the data and the product and what it might mean for the field. So these are informative for practitioners, they're for researchers, and some examples that we have here are descriptions of modifications to an assessment or an assessment program. They could be short reports on the development of novel instruments, methods, or resources, or they could be validation studies, research validating existing tools or a component of a research program associated with a specific test. We envision that brief reports will, necessarily have less literature and focus more on the methods and the data. So they will have 15 or fewer references. Next slide. Another area we're moving into is allowing authors to submit to language testing registered reports. And these are a big part of open science. Registered reports at first submission are 5,000 words or less. And this is because they are research protocols when they're first submitted. And so what I've done here is I've listed out the steps of submitting a registered report. And that's why these ones are not just bullets, but actually numbers showing the linear nature of the submission process. So what an author set would do first is submit their 5,000 word or less research proposal to the journal under the category of registered report. Then the language testing editors review it first to see if it's of a high enough quality to go out for external review. And if it is, then it's given to peer reviewers. And the language testing peer reviewers will evaluate the research importance and the quality and rigor of the methods. So a key area to note here is the research will not have been conducted yet. So it really is the research proposal. Graduate students might recognize this as the type of work that they would submit as a dissertation proposal and then have that reviewed at that stage. So when it goes out to be reviewed, the reviewers look at the methodology and also the sample size and the fit of the questions to the research methods. And if the reviewers agree that it looks like this proposal is solid, they may give the proposal an in-principle acceptance. And that is a green light to the researchers to go out and conduct the study and then come back and give the final paper to the journal language testing. So if the authors get the in-principle acceptance, then the next step is that the authors self-publish their protocol in a public registry as part of the Open Science Initiative. And there are different registries that can be used, including the Open Science Framework itself. Then they go ahead and carry out the study. And when they're done, they submit the finished 9,000 word or less paper to the registered paper category. The same reviewers review the final paper and they check for adherence to the registration. Did they do what they said they would do in their proposal? And they also check over the manuscript for overall clarity, but the article has already been pre-approved. And what this does is it helps authors publish without any publication bias. Since the paper was in principle accepted before the data were collected and before the results were known, the reviewers will not be influenced, is the hope. It's the goal of this. The reviewers will not be influenced by the outcomes of the study. So if non-significant results are found, that doesn't matter. We'll publish it anyways. The idea is the paper and the design and the study itself was solid, so it will go through. Right. Next slide. Another submission category we have is a viewpoint and counterpoints. These are 4,000 words for a main viewpoint and 1,500 words for counter viewpoints. So the reason why we're introducing this is to promote more interactivity in the journal. People can write about various topics, hot topics in language testing, or discuss theories in SLA that might be very important for language testing. And these can be invited position papers on key topics. So as editors, we may invite members of the field to write a viewpoint on an important topic. Counterpoints are these brief rejoinders where people can write a letter to the editor published as a viewpoint, but it would be shorter. And these would discuss the viewpoint that the other author or author set has described. We're hoping that these will be very timely topics, and we want to have an expedited review process for these so that they're timely and published as quick as possible. And we hope to be having authors who respond or lead current debates in the field that are important for everyone. Next slide. We're also really pleased to bring obituaries to the fore in the journal. We want these to be open and allow others to submit them who maybe we wouldn't have submissions from if we didn't have an open submission category. These are up to 750 words. The goal of them is to inform readers that a significant person in the field has died. It should recount information on the person's major works, their influences and impact on the field, and their effects on the field at large, really. Our hope is that we'll be able to honor and recognize language testers from around the world, ones we know and ones that we don't know, but who have had a significant impact in their local contexts. We want to remember and cherish all of the humans behind the craft of language testing and assessment. And we hope that this submission category will work towards that goal.